Hi, this is Yvonne Galusha, and the purpose of this video is to introduce you to the for loop. So what I've decided to do is to look at code where we are going to generate random numbers. So you can see here we're using a for loop, and anytime you want to do something in iteration repeatedly, use loop structures in code. And first you need to have what's called a control variable, and so that's an integer, and that's keeping track of the count, how many times you want to iterate through something. So in our case, we've got I, j, k, those are common variables used for loop iteration, and we're going to say we want to continue through this code in here 4 times. The first time through, I is equal to 1. This next, it designates the end of the for loop, but also accomplishes the increment. So the second time through, it's I is 2. Third time, I is 3. Once it hits 4, there's an automatic guard condition that checks, and then it does not continue again with the for loop. So inside the for loop, that's where you put your code that you want repeated. In our case, we're generating a random number, and we're going to go down column A for a few rows. So we're using the offset off of A1 where we had our little column label header, and we are then moving first time through. Offset moves us to the next cell, so it'll go in A2. Now here's the code to actually generate a random number, and we're using the built-in R&D random function to do that. This code is going to generate a number between 1 and 100. By adding 1 here, that basically gets it where it's not going to ever be 0. Then just for interest's sake, I've added this line of code where we are going to get a second delay. So if you ever need to do that, that's the way you do it. And here is how you add 1 second. So let's go back. And I've got this little macro set to a button so that we can now watch it generate random numbers. So you can see that worked. We got 4 random numbers generated. Now, what if we wanted to go across as well as down? What do we need to do then? So whenever you are going to go across as well as down, meaning 2 dimensions, you basically have to do nested for loops. So the inner for loop was how we went down 1 column. But now we want to also move across to the next column and go down, and then the next to the next column and go down. So we have to have an outer loop to accomplish traversing those columns. And then the inner loop in our case is traversing down the rows. So you see the inner loop hasn't changed. What I've done here is I've added an outer for loop. I'm using another loop counter variable, j in this case, and then I've got another next. And indentation can be very helpful in reading this code, so I highly encourage it as you're writing your code. Now, one thing I want to draw attention to is this 0. Why do you think I did that? Well, I did that because in the case before, I did not want to change the header. But now I'm just moving across the columns. So in this case, I need to have 0 here. Now also I forgot I need to make a change here, because now I need to have j be the variable that changes the offset, so it also moves to the next cell. Let's go back and run this, and then we can watch what happens. Move up first, and doesn't really matter where we've selected, but I'll select there and start. So you can see we went down, now we went across, and if our counters are correct, the columns go from 0 to 5. So that ended up being correct. Excuse me. If we look at the code, it's 0 to 4, but in essence that accomplishes 5, right? Because the first one is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but the inner for loop was going 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the part that people have to be careful about when they're using for loops. Sometimes you get the initial values where you either do one too many or one not enough, and so you just have to be careful and pay attention. Am I using offset or cells? And so how do you need those I and J values to start? So I hope you found this helpful for an introduction to for loops.